Okay, hello, everybody, and welcome to the weekly Pre-Shabbat AGJC Zoom call. Each week, we gather together, the Jewish communities of all 6 GCC countries and our families and friends from around the world to hear an inspirational message before Shabbat, light candles, hear Dvar Torah, pray, and read a section from the weekly Torah portion. Today, we will hear from Yona Roshi, whose grandfather had an orphanage during World War II, and a reason that a lot of Jewish children actually survived during the Nazi occupation. The Association of Gulf Jewish Communities is the umbrella organization for the Jewish communities of the GCC countries that are building and enhancing Jewish life in the region. While each community is independent, we share a common goal and vision for Jewish life to flourish in the Gulf for the benefit of both residents and visitors. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you will join us again next week. To stay updated on AGJC events, please follow us on Twitter at Gulf Jewish and visit our website, www.gulfjewish.org. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Huda. And then to get started, we'll turn it over to Sue, who's going to light the candles this week.
Thank you.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu shabbatenu shel Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much. And now we'll head to Isaac, who's going to lead us in Yedid Nefesh.
Yedid Nefesh Avarachaman Meshochatecha El Retzonecha Yarutz Abdecha Kemo Hayal Yishtachave Muladarecha Ki Yerab Lo Yedidutecha Minof etzuf vechol tam Adonai zif haolam nafshi cholat ahavatecha anael narefa nala beharod lanoam zivach אז תתחזק ותתרפא והייתה לה שפחת עולם ותהיה אמונה רחמך וחוסנה על בן אהובך כי זכה המה נחשף לראות בתפארת עוזך, אנא אלי מחמד ליבי, חוסנה, ואל תתעלה מגלנה, ופרוס חביב עלי, את סוכת שלומך, תאיר ארץ מכבודך, נגילה ונשמחה בך, מהר אהוב טיבה מועד, וכונני כי מעולם.
Thank you, Isaac. And now over to Alex for Lecha Dodi.
Lecha Dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. Shahamo v'zacho b'dibur echad ishmiyanu el hameyuchad Adonai echad u'shmo echad l'shem ol tiferet v'letila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala פני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה, לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי מקור הברכה מהראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. מקדש מלך עיר מלוכה, כה מציא מתוך ההפכה, אהב לך שבט בימי הבכה, ויהיו יחמול עלייך חמלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לא תבושי ימין ושמאל תפרוצי, ואת אדוני תריצי, על יד איש בן פרסי, ונשמחה ונגילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. בואי בשלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני ים סגולה, בואי חלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה.
Thank you so much, Alex. And don't go anywhere because we're going to ask that you please introduce today's speaker as well.
So it's a special moment for me to introduce my dear friend Yona Roshi. Little bit more than 50 years ago, we were going to the same school together. And at that time, as a child, I didn't realize how much we are actually connected. And I'm connected to Yona for two reasons. One reason is the reason that actually you, and I don't know if you enjoy, but you hear every Friday, is me reading from the Torah. Yona's father, may his memory be blessed, is the one who taught me for my bar mitzvah, and I still remember every time that I read, I still remember him, and I remember us sitting together and him teaching me. But there is a much more deep and a much more important connection between me and Yona. Yona is going to tell the story of his grandfather from his mother's side. I know him as Mr. Tiefenbronner, and I know that during the war and after the war, he had an orphanage in Belgium. And there is a big chance that if not his grandfather, there is a big chance that if not his grandfather, I would not be here with you every week. Maybe I will not be here at all. My father, together with his brothers, in 1943 were hidden during the war. And when the war finished, they were taken from the family that took care of them for almost 3 years. And they were put in the Jewish orphanage in Belgium that was run by Yona's grandfather and together with his grandmother. And I must say that so many children, so many grandchildren and great-grandchildren today actually owe their life to this special man. So Yona, I will let the floor to you, and please tell us the story.
Well, thank you, Alex, for this amazing introduction. Very moved. Yes, my father 22 years ago passed away, but we're here to talk about my grandfather, our joint, we have a joint thing together. Your father and your uncles were there. Well, after all the introduction, I only have 8 minutes. I'll try to be brief. My grandfather, his name was Yona Tiefenbronner. I'll show you a picture. This is, can you see the picture? Yes, you can. This was my grandfather. His name was Yona Tiefenbronner. My grandfather was born in Germany in 1914 in Wiesbaden, in a town called Wiesbaden. He learned rabbinical studies. He did some community services, and somehow he reached Belgium. I mean, many German people reached Belgium during the beginning of the war. And yes, the Nazis actually invaded Belgium on May 10th, 1940. And that's just the day after my grandfather married my grandmother. Now, the honeymoon, he was, I wouldn't say delighted, but he spent in prison. The Nazis imprisoned him just the following day after they got married. And 3-4 days, well, the 3-4 days afterwards, he was released. They imprisoned everyone who was not a Belgian citizen. He was German with a German citizenship, and the Nazis didn't know what to do with him. Eventually, like I said, they let him go. And this is where my grandfather started to think, what's next? He had papers. He could have fled to Switzerland, him and my grandmother, or as the Jewish community in Antwerp asked him, please take the kids. There were tens of, I think, close to 100 orphans who had no home. They didn't know where to go. They either lost their parents or they lost one parent. Parents had to fled to other countries. My grandfather took the decision as a man of education to take the kids and to save them. Now, you got to imagine this picture. It's 1940. The Nazis invaded Belgium. It's war. I mean, you just see the terrible pictures now of Turkey, and it reminds me of like being in the middle of a war zone. You look at the Turks, you look at 20,000 dead, over 20,000 dead, and you see all the homes ruined. Imagine the same picture in Belgium, and imagine the Nazis that don't really like us Jews control everything, and they're about to kill all the Jews. This is their mission. For some reason, some odd reason, they allowed my grandfather to run this this home and to run this orphanage. Nobody understands how. I spoke to my grandmother many times. My grandfather passed away about 3 years before I was born. He passed away in 1962. So all the stories I heard from my grandmother, obviously. She could never explain to me, how did they manage to keep this orphanage during all the years, during the 5 years of the Nazi occupation in Belgium, and get away with it? And I'll tell you the story. It's a miraculous story. There are many, 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 many stories, but this is a miracle. Kids were in the orphanage. It was some night, I don't know what year. It was in the midst of the Nazi occupation, of the whole, everything going on. And in the middle of the night, the Nazis they barged into the house, into the orphanage, and they were about to arrest all the kids, obviously my grandparents, the staff. And, you know, my grandfather puts his clothes on, he goes downstairs, he meets the Nazi officer, and then suddenly the Nazi officer looks at him, and he says to him in German, Herr Jonas, können Sie mich? Mr. Jonas, do you know who I am? My grandfather, obviously scared stiff, I mean, didn't know where it comes from, says, no. So the German tells him, you were my classmate. You were sitting at a table right next to me in class. And he ordered his soldiers to get out of the house and left them alone. It's a miracle. There is no understanding. I mean, since when does a Nazi officer like any Jew, classmates or not? There was one of the miracles that occurred in this house. So actually, we're talking about an orphanage. They led a Jewish life, and they had two goals in upbringing those kids, saving the kids, obviously. But one goal was to lead a religious Jewish Orthodox, and my grandfather was very Orthodox, so leading a very Jewish Orthodox life, and ultimately to make Aliyah to Israel, to come and live in Israel. this was supposed to be, ultimately, this was supposed to be the plan. Now, my grandfather was not judgmental. He didn't say, okay, this child comes from that home, and this child comes from this home. He had, for example, a girl who was hidden for a few years in a monastery, and she wore a cross. I don't know, she was 7, 8 years old, and she came to my grandfather. Somehow she reached my grandfather's orphanage, and she had a cross on the chest. And my grandfather didn't say, hey, take your cross off, and this is a Jewish establishment and this is an Orthodox establishment. He accepted her as she is. This was his greatness. His love to the kids, I mean, Alex can also tell you that, it was unbelievable. He loved all the kids, everyone. I wouldn't say more than his own kids. He had 2 daughters, and one was born. The first daughter was my mother. She was born 42. My aunt was born in 45, and my other aunt 48. So at least 2 kids he had in the orphanage, and he had to take care of them. But he actually gave, I'd say, at least the same attention that he had to give to his kids, he gave to the other kids. During the entire life, and please don't forget, we're talking here, we're in the midst of the Nazi occupation. I mean, we know all the stories, Auschwitz, transports, the trains, the death march. We know all these stories, but this is a story of salvation, of continuation, of continuing. Alex is alive. And this is a living testimony. Alex is a living testimony of what my amazing grandparents did. They took in his father and his uncles, and Alex is with us this day. You take Jewish holidays, Purim, Hanukkah, Passover. Everything was there was just to create a family. My grandfather had this game. Each kid had to make, well, they didn't have any money, obviously. So each kid had to make something and give the other child. That was the Hanukkah present. So you make a doll out of something. You try to put a few chocolates together and give it to your friend. Each one had to give somebody else, like that, this basket with all the names, and you took a name out, and this was your partner of giving him a present. It was beautiful, was family-like, it was very Orthodox, as I said. But here's one interesting thing. They reached a time that there was no food, there was nothing left, and they had to eat. Some kids were malnourished, and the rabbis told them, please eat pork. It's okay. Eat pork, because the kids need to live. This is our future. And yes, he gave them pork. You think, a religious rabbi wouldn't give them pork. Yes, he gave them pork. I can continue with many stories, but eventually the Nazis pulled out in 1945, and the kids stayed in the orphanage until 1960, when the orphanage closed. During these 15 years, my grandfather gave them the right education, the right direction. He introduced them to families, to where to work. In Antwerp, it was easy because most Jews worked in the diamond business. So he put a lot of them in the diamond business. Today, many of these kids live in Israel. There's the American dream, and there was my grandfather's dream. Well, my grandfather's dream was to bring them all to Israel. Many live in Israel today. My grandfather himself could not reach that dream because there was some kind of since he was Orthodox, there was this other movement in Israel who was secular, and they didn't want too much of Orthodox in an orphanage, an establishment, to come to Israel. It was some kind of a strange, weird thing, but at least I can say the kids were saved, families were formed, and today we have very big families. Thank God, very big families. Because of my dear, dear grandparents. It was Yona and Ruth Tiefenbrunner. And I'm so proud and humble to be their grandchild and to carry their name, Yona. That's my name as well, after my grandfather. I think still have time.
I think it's an amazing story, Yona. I would like you to share eventually the link to the movie on that people can see on YouTube about.
Yes,
about
it's
your
on
grandfather.
YouTube. Your father speaks there, and your uncle speaks there. It's amazing.
Anyway.
My aunt speaks there. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing.
And I think you are having his name, and you are sharing his story with much grace. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Please allow me one last thing. I think we should all pray for there was a terror attack about an hour and a half ago in Jerusalem.
So anyway, after the reading, I will make a prayer for Rabbi Abadi. So we will pray for the
exactly. Thank you very much. Shabbat shalom to all.
Thank you very much for sharing that really moving story. So thank you. And now we will head over to Rabbi Reuben, who's going to share a few words of Divrei Torah with us.
Shabbat shalom, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here again with you. And this week's parsha is Parshat Yitro. This is obviously, it's a fundamental parsha, and in it is the revelation itself. We receive the 10 Commandments, the Aseret HaDebrot. And I want to ask, like, a fundamental question. We've got these 10 Commandments. How do we split these 10? How do we categorize them? And we know that traditionally, and often we're taught this in school, they're traditionally split into two groups of 5. We've got the 5 commandments between us and God, and 5 between us and our fellow human being. And that's sort of the traditional one. I want to present a different approach this week, something for us to think about, which inspired me, and it's from the teachings of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, the chief rabbi of England now, eminent Torah teacher around the world, and he presents a whole different way of looking at the 10 Commandments. Because he says in ancient times, and often you look in other theories, other religions at the time, often you see the way that they structure documents or numbers or rules or regulations was in odd numbers. Often you got, let's say 10, either let's say 7, groups of 7. So for example, we know 7 days of the week, 7 days of creation, you've got 2 groups of 3, and then at the ends you've got 1, the purpose, at the end, the 7th, which is Shabbat. Or the 10 plagues, he says, is 3 groups of 3, and each of those 3 groups of something, and then the final plague, the slaying of the firstborn, was like the ultimate plague. And he says that the same thing, when you look at the 10 Commandments, you can look at them as 3 groups of 3, and then 1 purpose in a way. So how does that work? So he says, if you look at the first 3 commandments, you've got, I am God, there shall be no other gods, you shall not take my name in vain. These are the fundamental principles of spirituality, that there's a God in the world, that we build a relationship with God. The next 3 are all about creativeness. Shabbat, honoring your parents, do not murder. This is about the creation of life and creation and respecting creation. And then the next 3 are 3 mitzvot to do with society. Don't rob, don't commit adultery, don't give false witness. So we've got God, creativeness, and society. But then what about the 10th commandment? The 10th commandment is lo tachmod, you shall not be jealous. Now, what has that got to do? Why is the not be jealous? How can we not be jealous? It's a very hard thing to command somebody, don't be jealous. And why is this the purpose? And Rabbi Sacks says something very beautiful here, and very profound. And he says, lo tachmod, do not be jealous. It's actually teaching us something else. It's teaching us the art of gratitude, to appreciate how important gratitude is, to be grateful for what we have. And ultimately, all these 10 commandments are focusing on this idea of being grateful for the moment. The first 3 is reminding us that we have a God that we can reach out to at any time, and to feel grateful that at any point of time we can reach out and build a relationship with God. Secondly, that we come from parents and we're built and we're in a society that we're created from parents and in a certain way from certain families, and in a way to be grateful for each of our unique upbringings. And to feel grateful for that. And therefore, these 10 Commandments in this light is looking at it in a very different way. It's all teaching us ultimately to appreciating the moment, to appreciating each other, the families we're built in, the communities we live in, and ultimately the God that we serve. Wishing all of you a wonderful Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, and thank you so much, Rabbi Reuben, for sharing your words of Divrei Torah with us. And now we're going to go to Alex, who's going to read from this week's Parsha.
And as I said, I want to dedicate this reading in memory of my teacher, Yona's father. וישמע יתרו כהן מדיין חותן משה את כל אשר עשה אלוהים למשה ולישראל עמו כי יוציא אדוני את ישראל ממצרים ויקח יתרו חותן משה את ציפורה אשת משה אחר שילוחיה ואת שני בניה אשר שם האחד גרשום כי אמר גר הייתי בארץ נוכיה ושם האחד אליעזר כי אלוהי אבי בעזרי ויצילני מחרב פרעה ויבוא יתרו חותן משה ובניו ואשתו אל משה אל המדבר אשר הוא חונה שם הר האלוהים ויאמר אל משה אני חותנך יתרו בעליך ואשתך ושני בניה עמה ויצא משה לקראת חותנו וישתחו וישקלו וישאלו איש לרעהו לשלום ויבואו העולה ויספר משה לחותנו את כל אשר עשה אדוני לפרעה למצרים על אודות ישראל את כל התלאה אשר מצאתם בדרך ויצילם אדוני ויחד יתרו על כל הטובה אשר עשה אדוני לישראל אשר הצילו מיד מצרים ויאמר יתרו ברוך אדוני אשר הציל אתכם מיד מצרים ומיד פרעה אשר הציל את העם מתחת יד מצרים עתה ידעתי כי גדול אדוני מכל האלוהים כי בדבר אשר זדו עליהם ויקח יתרו חותן משה עולה וזבחים לאלוהים ויבוא אהרון וכל זקני ישראל לאכול לחם עם חותן משה לפני האלוהים. And now a prayer for Rabbi Abadi and for the victims of the terrorist attack today. מי שברך אבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב משה ואהרון דוד ושלמה הוא יברך וירפא את החולה הרב אליהו שמעון בן מזל פורטונה ואת כל נפגעי הטרור בעבור שאנחנו ניתן מתנה בעבורם בשכר זה הקדוש ברוך הוא ימלא רחמים עליהם להחלימם ולרפאותם ולהחזיקם ולחיותם וישלח להם מהרה רפואה שלמה מן השמיים לרמ"ח איבריהם ושס"ה ידיהם בתוך שאר חולי ישראל רפואת הנפש ורפואת הגוף השתה בגלה וזמן קריב ונאמר אמן.
Thank you. And now over to Eric, who's going to give the English translation.
Jethro, priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, God's people, how Adonai had brought Israel out from Egypt. So Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after she had been sent home, and her two sons, of whom one was named Gershom, that is to say, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. And the other was named Eleazar, meaning, the God of my father's house was my help, delivering me from the sword of Pharaoh. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought Moses' sons and wife to him in the wilderness where he was encamped at the mountain of God. He sent word to Moses, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her two sons. Moses went out to meet his father-in-law. He bowed low and kissed him. Each asked after the other's welfare, and they went into the tent. Moses then recounted to his father-in-law everything that Adonai had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardships that had befallen them on the way, and how Adonai had delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced over all the kindness that Adonai had shown Israel, when delivering them from the Egyptians. Blessed be Adonai, Jethro said, who delivered you from the Egyptians and from Pharaoh, and who delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that Adonai is greater than all gods, yes, by the result of their very schemes against the people. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices for God. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to partake of the meal before God with Moses' father-in-law.
Thank you very much. And now we'll head over to Tal for the prayer for the GCC. Oh, Tal, I think you're muted. Nope. Okay. I think we'll switch around the order a little bit. Isaac, if you're ready, then we'll
I
go
am.
to,
No problem.
perfect. Excellent. So Isaac has
Oh.
a,
I am going to be singing, as this week was Tu B'Shvat and the New Year of the Trees. There's a beautiful piyut, a song called the Song of the Flowers, or the Debate of the Flowers, depends who you ask what the name is, and it goes like this. Alabar quiero a Dios, que es grande de los mares, que crió para el hombre tantas maneras de flores, y todas son diferentes en color y en olores, entre todas las mejores. Es el almizclero ajuntáronse las flores, alabar a Dios a una, que las creó tan donosas, lindas sin tallar ninguna. Dicen verajot en ellas, como dicen en la luna, así dice cada una, no hay más mejor que mí. Saltó la rosa y dijo, todas se queden a un lado, a mí me toca alabar a Dios grande y abastado, que de mí hacen charope, también azúcar rosada, en agua soy alabada, a la cara alaban con mí. Respondió la clavelina, más grandes son las mis famas, que gozo en mesas de novias y me llevan en las palmas y me mandan por presente a todas las lindas damas, me quieren como sus almas, todas se adoran con mí. Y ya vio la albahaca como mí, no hay tal, que soy verde y menudita, mi color muy natural. A mí me crecen árboles como barrotes de metal, como el guisado sin sal. Son las rosas sin mí. La azucena quiso cantar una cántica galana, a mí me toca alabar que soy rosa de ventana, mi aceite hace crecer cabellosa las galanas, y mi color es tan bueno que se desmayan por mí. Ahí hablo el almizcle, una habla graciosita, a mí me toca alabar, aunque me ves tan chiquita, que de mí hacen ya mires, me comen con cucharita y toda la gente rica se refrescan con mí. And it goes on and on and on. And basically every flower says why that particular flower should be praising God, because they're the best, because of the color, because of the shape, because of the smell, and because what it's used for.
Wow, thank you, Isaac. We always enjoy when you share some of these piyutim with us around the Chagim, so we thank you so much. And before we head back to Isaac for Shalom Aleichem, I will quickly read the prayer for the GCC. May he who gives salvation to kings and dominion to princes, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, who delivers his servant David from the evil sword, who makes a way in the sea and a path through the mighty waters, bless and protect, guard and help, exalt, magnify, and uplift. His Majesty the King of Saudi Arabia, His Majesty the King of Bahrain, His Majesty the Sultan of Oman, His Highness the President of the UAE, His Highness the Emir of Kuwait, His Highness the Emir of Qatar, and all their crown princes. And may the Supreme King of Kings in his mercy put a spirit of wisdom and understanding into their hearts and the hearts of all their counselors and officials to deal kindly with us, the house of Jacob, and all the people of this land. Be their shelter and stronghold, and let them not falter. In their days and in hours, may these lands be blessed with stability, prosperity, and peace. May this be his will, and let us say amen. Before we go back to Isaac, a quick reminder, please join us again next week. Same new time, so everybody in the States gets a little bit of extra sleep. Same Zoom link, in case there's any issues, and the same great lineup of speakers and program that we have. Isaac, please lead us out with Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Asharet, Malachi Elyon, Mimelech Malchei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Boachem LeShalom, Malachi Ashalom, Malachi Elyon, Mimelech Malchei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baruchuni LeShalom, Malachi Ashalom, Malachi Elyon, Mimelech Malchei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Tzetechem LeShalom, Malachi Ashalom, Malachi Elyon, Mimelech Malchei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom. Have a great week. See you next week.
Shalom.